Sorry for the delay. As Alexander already mentioned, I will talk about the law of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. So, for the introduction, I would say that amongst the major classical political economists of the 18th and early 19th century, the notion that the average rate of profit has a tendency to decline on the long term was widely accepted and basically considered as an evident fact. So Adam Smith, David Ricardo, as well as John Stuart Mill all treated it as an empirically confirmed and therefore indisputable law that is of utmost importance for the political economy. But although they were in agreement when it came to a simple task of straightforwardly asserting the existence of the law, they nevertheless departed when it came to a much harder task of theoretically grasping and articulating this law. So when they struggled to explain the structural causes that the structural causes of the decline in the average rate of profit, they offered various diverging and dubious explanations that were far from evident or clear. So when Marx first dealt with this law in his 1857-1858 manuscripts that are most widely known as the Grundrisse, he could stress the following. So this is in every respect the most important law of modern political economy and the most essential for understanding the most difficult relations. It is a law which, despite its simplicity, has never before been grasped and even less consciously articulated. So in Grundrisse and in the third volume of Capital, Marx developed his own rather sophisticated exposition of the law of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall, and ever since his account was laid out, it remained highly controversial and continuously disputed subject, especially amongst Marxist scholars themselves. Some of them have praised Marx's account of the law, considering it as a final and irrefutable solution of a riddle that occupied political economists for more than a century, and also used it as a foundation of Marx's theory of crisis. Yet others have criticized it and denounced it as irrelevant in regards to his theory of crisis. But it has to be stressed out that it was the supposed intertwined connection between this law and Marx's theory of crisis that made the discussion around this law so polemical and so contentious. So, namely, since the proponents of the law saw it as the most, as the ultimate argument for why the inherent systemic dynamics of growth in capitalism undermines its very conditions and consequently leads to periodic crises that necessitate the revolutionary outthrow of capitalism, the opponents of the law were often viewed as some kind of heretics or revisionists whose denouncement of the law also necessarily discredits Marx's theory of crisis as well as its profound political revolutionary implications. Anyhow, after more than a century of heated debates among Marxist scholars, there still is no general agreement about the validity of this law, as well as there is still no compliance on the question of the implications of this law for a theory of crisis as well as for political strategies. So hence it seems that this tradition of the controversies about the law of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall still weighs like a nightmare on the brains of contemporary Marxists. So today I will try to deal with some of the aspects of this infamous subject. I will start with some preliminary conceptual clarifications and proceed with a presentation of Marx's exposition of this law from the third volume of Capital. Later on I will present a critique of this law, which was laid out by German Marxist and Marxologist Michael Heinrich. So the initial idea for the lecture was a bit too pretentious. I also wanted to present an historical account of the controversies concerning this law, including some of the critiques of the law of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall by theoreticians such as Paul Sweezy, Joan Robinson, and so on. But I also intended to discuss some implications of this law for Marx's theory of crisis. However, during the preparation for the lecture, I soon found out that this would be a bit too much for me to handle in one lecture, not to mention that it would be probably a bit frustrating for those of you who are not familiar with Marx theory. So considering the fact that these lectures are also of kind of a didactical nature, I thus decided to present only Marx's exposition of this law and Heinrich's critique of the law. So I chose Heinrich's critique in as much as I found it the most plausible and coherent critical account of Marx's law, which can also be comprehended without frustrating digressions into complex arithmetic and so on. So, but the aforementioned topics that will be left out can nevertheless be discussed in the questions and answer session. So let's get to the point. Even though Marx dealt with this law in several writings, I will only examine his account in chapters 13 and 14 of the third volume of Capital. But before we get to this exposition of the law, we will have to make a detour since a few preliminary clarifications are needed. So I will start with the depiction of the value of the commodity. We're talking about a commodity which is produced in the capitalist mode of production, and Marx outlined it in the following formula. I've already written it out on the board. So C stands for the value of the commodity, C, the big C, and the small c is constant capital. This is basically a portion of value that is laid out in means of production, such as machines, other real estate, and raw materials that are used in the capitalist process of production. Whereas V stands for variable capital, which is basically a portion of value that is used to pay workers' wages, and therefore equals the value of labor power. So these two components of capital, so C plus V, play qualitatively different roles in the determination of value of the commodity. Namely, the means of production do not create any new value in the process of production, but only transfer their value or a portion of their value to the value of the final product, of the final commodity. So labor power, on the other hand, does not transfer its value to the final product, but rather creates new value in the process of production. So particularly, labor power creates a new amount of value which is needed to cover the costs of its reproduction, and an additional amount of value which is called surplus value. So this is this S. So if the value of the means of production constitutes one portion of value of the commodity by means of the transfer of value, which equals C, labor power constitutes the other portion of value of the commodity by means of the creation of new value, which equals V plus S. So workers therefore produce the whole value added, but only receive a part of this newly created value in wages. So this of course implies that workers during the process of production are exploited, since they are only paid with wages that equal the value of variable capital, even though they also produce surplus value. So in view of the fact that in the capitalist mode of production only labor power or living labor produces value as well as surplus value, the valorization of capital rests on this component of variable capital. So the rate of valorization of capital is thus basically a certain ratio of surplus value to variable capital. So this ratio is called the rate of surplus value. So it can be depicted as follows, so S divided by V. So this concept of the rate of surplus value is of great importance from the standpoint of theory, since it, among others, also designate the rate of exploitation. But from the standpoint of the individual capitalist, it is practically irrelevant, since a capitalist does not perceive any difference between constant and variable capital as far as their role in the creation of value is concerned. He's rather interested in the yield on total capital advanced, or on in the rate of return on the total capital advanced. So at the start of the production process, the capitalist is mostly interested in the sum of money that designates how much the commodities which are needed for production will cost him. So the crucial quantity for the individual capitalist is therefore the cost price, which is designated by Marx as follows. So this is cost price equals C plus V. So constant plus variable capital. So this indicates how much the production of commodities will cost the capitalist. But when these commodities are produced and about to be sold, he's mostly interested in the sum of money against which these commodities will be sold. So he's thus interested in the surplus of money over the initial cost price. So the difference between the sale price of commodities and the cost price. So this difference, which is basically of utmost importance for the capitalist in his practical activity, is profit. So profit is basically a form of realization of surplus value. It's not equal to surplus value. It is like a form of appearance of value. It is surplus value that is realized as the yield on total capital advanced, so on C plus V. So, but as soon as this surplus value is realized in the form of profit, its own source becomes, so to say, concealed, since we have stressed that surplus value originates from the exploitation of labor power in the process of production. However, when profit is realized, this fact becomes veiled. So the return on capital is considered by the capital as the yield on the whole capital advanced, so the yield on C and V, and this is why it seems as if surplus value does not originate from a specific part of capital, from variable capital solely, but from constant and variable capital, capital equally. So the actual conditions of the creation of surplus value are thus mystified in its realization in the form of profit. So from the point of view of the capitalist, the rate of valorization of capital is thus not the rate of surplus value, but basically the ratio between surplus value and the whole capital advanced. So the rate of valorization for the capitalist is basically the rate of profit. So the rate of profit can be depicted in a general formula, which is surplus value divided by constant plus variable capital. So this equals the whole capital advanced. So every time this capital is advanced, the capitalist is of course interested in the highest possible rate of return or the highest possible rate of profit. The basic way in which the rate of profit can, under otherwise constant conditions, be raised is by an increase in the rate of surplus value. So this can be done in two different ways, either by the increase in the production of absolute surplus value or by the increase of relative surplus value. So the increase of the production of absolute surplus value is achieved simply by lengthening surplus labor time. This is basically the time in which workers produce surplus value. This is achieved by a simple method of lengthening the workday. On the other hand, the increase of relative surplus value is achieved by an increase in the productivity of labor. So the most important mechanism for increasing the productivity of labor in the capitalist mode of production is the use of heavy machinery. So when the productivity of labor in the branches that produce means of subsistence or that produce inputs for these branches increases, then increases due to the introduction of labor saving technology, then the value of this means of subsistence decreases. And since the value of labor power is determined by the value of this means of subsistence, this means that the value of labor power decreases. So socially necessary labor time for the production of commodities therefore falls. And although the workday does not increase, surplus labor time relative to necessary social labor time does increase. So it has to be stressed that in the context of the capitalist mode of production, this production of surplus value in general or the production of relative surplus value in particular is for an individual capitalist basically a necessity. So should a certain capitalist lag far behind in productivity increases relative to his competitors, he would soon lose his market share and initially go out of business. But it has to be stressed out that the rate of profit does not only fluctuate due to changes in the rate of surplus value, namely capitalists which produce with the same amount, or not amount, but same rate of surplus value, can have different rates of profit. So this is because different capitals can have different compositions of capital. So according to Marx, the composition of capital has to be understood in a twofold sense. On the one side, so on the side of value, it is determined by the proportion in which it is divided into constant capital and variable capital. Whereas on the side of, as Marx called it, material, it is determined by the relation between the mass of the means of production that are employed and the mass of labor that is necessary to employ them. So basically the composition of capital on the side of value is called value composition of capital, so which is simply, as I've said, ratio of constant to variable capital in value terms. But the composition of capital on the side of material is, on the other hand, technical composition of capital. So this is the ratio of the mass of the means of production to the mass of labor employed. Okay, then basically value composition of capital and technical composition of capital are in a certain correlation, and Marx basically expresses this correlation with the concept of organic composition of capital, which is basically depicted mathematically in the same way as value composition of capital, which is C divided by V. But the specificity of organic composition of capital is that it only expresses the ratio of constant to variable capital in value terms insofar as it reflects the technical composition of capital. So you have to keep in mind that this organic composition of capital only varies as a consequence in changes of the technical composition of capital, but it does not reflect, say, changes in the value of C or V, which might occur due to some other reasons. Okay, so I've said that So I've said that different capitals with equal rates of surplus value can have different rates of profit. So particularly a capital with a low organic composition of capital will realize a higher rate of profit than a capital with a high organic composition of capital. So this can be illustrated by a rather simple numerical example. Oops. So if the, I don't know, organic composition of capital of the first capital is, I don't know, 40 to 60, and the organic composition of capital of the other capital is 60 to 40. And if we presuppose that the rate of surplus value is in both cases 1, which equals 100%, then we can depict two rates of profit. So in the first case, the rate of profit, which is S divided by C plus V, is 60 divided by 40 plus 60, which is of course 60%. While in the other case, the rate of profit will be 40 divided by 40 plus 60 equals 40%. So we can see that under otherwise constant conditions, the higher the organic composition of capital, the lower the rate of profit, and vice versa. So, but if we depart from this conclusion, we are immediately faced with a problem, because in reality it seems that capitalists tend to realize a certain unified rate of return on their capital advanced, which seems to be totally independent of organic compositions of different capitals. So, but Marx also explains why this is so. So, following the thesis that the sole interest of an individual capitalist is the maximization of profit, he recognizes that if some branches offer lower rates of profit than others, then capitalists will obviously pull out their capital from these branches and invest it into branches with higher rate of profit. So the rates of profit in different branches will tend to converge because capital will flee from the branches with low rates of profit to branches with high rates of profit. And this equalization of various rates of profit will, according to Marx, at least in the context of the free movement of capital, basically be produced automatically by the mechanism of competition. Namely, if the capital is withdrawn from the branches with low rates of profit, the supply of the commodities in these branches will shrink. And consequently, the supply of these branches will shrink, and consequently the prices of commodities will rise. And in turn, this will cause the rates of profit in these branches also to rise again. So on the other hand, if the branches with high rates of profit are witnessing an influx of capital, this will cause the supply of this, the supply of the commodities in these branches to rise. So the prices will therefore fall, and consequently the rate of profit will also tend to fall. So this is how the mechanism of competition will, in sort of a way, automatically produce a tendency for the rates of profit in branches with different organic compositions of capital to equalize. So these rates of profit of different capital will equalize into what Marx calls a general or average rate of profit. But this same mechanism will, in the eyes of the individual capitalist, also additionally conceal the fact that surplus value originates from labor, since it will solidify the illusion that surplus value is but the rate of return on the whole capital advance. So under the conditions of this average equalizing rate of profit, in each individual capitalist basically receives an average rate of profit no matter what the portion of or what the ratio of constant to variable capital is in his productive unit. So everybody will tend to basically at least of course again, if we abstract from other conditions, realize an average profit under these conditions. So the average profit can be, so this is profit average, can be depicted as C plus V divided by the average rate of profit. So with the, and if we have this quantity of average profit at hand, we can then also calculate what Marx calls the price of production, which is basically nothing else but the sum of cost price and average profit. So price of production is therefore cost price plus average profit. So this is basically a price of a commodity by means of which a capitalist realizes an average rate of profit. And now just one more thing has to be clarified before we get to Marx's explication of the law of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. So we stressed that the production of relative surplus value, which is achieved by increases in the productivity of labor by means of introduction of labor-saving technology, is for an individual capitalist a necessity. So if a certain capitalist lags far behind in productivity hikes relative to his competitors, he soon loses his market share. But however, the capitalists do not increase productivity for its own sake, but rather for the sake of extra profit. So extra profit is basically defined as a profit above this average profit that we have depicted here. So an individual capitalist can realize an extra profit if he reduces his costs of production below the social average. So the capitalist will introduce machinery only if resulting boost in productivity will lower his cost price and hence raise his rate of profit. So we can also illustrate this with a numerical example. So let's presuppose that in branches, that in the branch that produces cars, all commodities, say all cars of companies are sold at the uniform price of production, which is, say now price of production equals, as you said, C plus V plus average profit, say that it is 100, that constant capital equals 100 units, variable capital equals also 100 units. Well, yeah. Tu.
Zašto se to množi?
Aha, ja tukaj imaš, to je average profit, S ulomljeno s C plus V, S divided by C plus V.
Zašto se to množi s ovim prvim izrazom, C plus V?
Stavio da se množi, da li se množi? Does it multiplies?
Yeah.
Or is it just added?
Obično se prosjek dijeli.
Aha, yeah.
You said
yeah,
divides, but you in this one you said divides, but you wrote it that it multiplies, I think.
Oops. No.
Okay.
Wait a second.
Ne, dakle, samo prvi, ja ne znam odakle je izvod došao, ali obično prosjek se dijeli, dakle imamo nekakav niz i onda dijelimo sa brojem.
Yes,
sumom tog niza, sad ne, okay.
Yes, I only summed this up from Mars, but actually, I mean, this will not be such an important category, only this one will be the cost, basically the average price, but I will look into that. So, okay, yes, and let's presuppose here that this average profit is 50, then the price of production will of course be 250. So now, if we now assume that in one of the car companies a new labor-saving technology is introduced, and that by means of this technology labor productivity increases substantially. So should the productivity increase for, I don't know, say around 100%, the time that is needed for the production of a car would be cut in half. So this means that the capitalist would now be able to produce the same car with 50% less variable capital. So if we assume that C would now increase for, I don't know, 10 units, so the new price would now be 110, and because we only need half as much variable capital as in the previous case, this value of variable capital will be, I mean, we're here talking about the cost, a new cost price for this new productive unit. I'm getting confused. Which is 160 units. So we can see that in the first case the cost price, which equals C plus V, was 200, and now this cost price is reduced to 110 plus 50, which equals 160. So
that is less. The point is that it is
less. It is less. Yeah.
So the profit is
yeah, so we can see that the cost price for this car selling capitalist has shrank here for 40 units. So the cost of production of his car is now much smaller, but in the beginning we've said that all cars, all the commodities in this branch are sold according to the uniform price of production. So should our capitalist sell the car for the for this price of production, his new profit will basically be, so profit is now, just a second, as new profit will now equal 250, which is the basically price of production by which we can sell this car, and a new cost price, which is 460. This means that this profit equals 90 units. So the capitalist will thus realize an average profit, which is 50 units, and an additional extra profit of 40. And now the labor-saving innovation and the corresponding productivity boost in our car-making enterprise will, of course, lead to the increase of the output. But this increase of the output, basically increase in the number of cars produced in this example, is worth nothing for the capitalist if it is not accompanied by a corresponding increase in the demand for his cars. So, and the usual way for the individual capitalist to take care of this problem is to lower the prices of his commodities. So it is evident that the discussed capitalist can sell the cars even below the price of production by which the cars are sold by his fellow competitors, and still realize an extra profit. So if he were to sell his car by the price of 240, he would still realize basically 80 units of profit, meaning 50 units of average profit plus 30 units of extra profit. But we have to stress that the capitalist decision to lower these prices of commodities is not without consequences for the capitalist competitors, because since their cars become now relatively dearer in comparison with the cars of our innovative capitalists, they start to lose their market share. So they will thus be structurally compelled by what Marx calls the iron laws of competition to follow these paths of our innovative capitalists and increase the productivity of labor in order to bring down their cost price. So in this fashion, capitalist competition tends to generalize the productivity boosts as well as these cost reductions. And conceding that the productivity hike is generalized throughout the whole branch, the extra profit of this aforementioned capitalist now disappears. So in as much as the cost price now shrinks for all the capitalists, the advantage for the capitalists that initiated this increasing productivity simply ceases to exist. So with this, So with these preliminary clarifications in mind, we can now finally discuss Marx's exposition of the law of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. So in the third volume of Capital, Marx tried to show that the average rate of profit has a tendency to decline, which originates from the peculiar nature of the capitalist mode of production itself. So note that Marx did not argue that the rate of profit in capitalism is subjected to a certain straightforward decline no matter what the circumstances. Marx was of course aware that the rising average rate of profit might very well be the case. He considered various countervailing factors that can either postpone the fall in the rate of profit or result in a temporary rise in the rate of profit. Particularly in Capital Volume 3, he discussed several so-called counter-tendencies to the law of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall, such as reduction of wages below the value of labor power, cheapening the factors of constant capital by various means, or reduction of the costs of industrial inputs and consumer goods by means of foreign trade. So also the increase in share capital, which devolves part of the cost for the usage of capital to others, etc., etc. So Marx did not at any point deny that these counter tendencies may very well result in a rise of the rate of profit. However, he did argue that these counter tendencies are basically of temporary nature. So from the standpoint of the inherent dynamics of the capitalist system, they are but contingencies. So hence in his exposition of the law, Marx's intention was to prove that independent of such contingent factors of temporary nature, the rate of profit has a tendency to fall due to inherent dynamics of the capitalist mode of production. And this peculiar dynamics of capitalism rests on the production of, as I've noted before, relative surplus value. So we have shown that the production of relative surplus value depends on technical innovation. An obvious result of this constant adoption of newer and ever more efficient means of production is, of course, the displacement of human labor from the process of production. And herein also lays the crux of Marx's argument, namely, since profit crucially depends on the production of surplus value, which rests on surplus labor performed solely by living labor in the process of production, the displacement of this living labor with machines will, in otherwise constant conditions, result in a fall in the rate of profit. So it is obvious that increases in productivity by means of this displacing of living labor by machines necessitates a rise in the organic composition of capital. So call to mind that organic composition of capital is the ratio in value terms of constant to variable capital insofar as this ratio reflects the technical composition of capital, which is the ratio between the mass of the means of production and the mass of living labor. So let's now see how the organic composition of capital could affect the rate of profit. So I've already written down the general formula of the rate of profit, which is S divided by C plus V, and we can now basically divide all the elements in this equation by V, and then we get such an equation which is C divided by V divided by C divided by V plus 1, since if we abbreviate V divided by V, we get 1. So as we can see that this denominator of the equation is basically equal to organic composition of capital or value composition of capital, depends on how we basically address the subject and the dynamics, but okay, we can say that we will deal with organic composition of capital, while this, the numerator we can see basically implies the rate of surplus value. So if we depart from this equation, it is basically not so hard to show that the rise in the organic composition of capital, which results from labor, from the adoption of labor-saving technologies, will, in otherwise constant conditions, necessitate fall in the rate of profit. So if we have now the example where we have the first and the second example, and so okay, we now have this second equation of the rate of surplus value divided by organic composition of capital plus 1, and if we assume that this rate of surplus value is 2, while organic composition, or 2, which is same as 200%, and that organic composition of capital is 100%, which equals 1, we have to add another one. Then we can see that this rate of profit is 1 or 100%. But if we now presuppose that the organic composition of capital increases, we then have this second formula, which is we presuppose that the rate of surplus value is constant, but then we also presuppose that variable capital rises from organic composition of capital rises from 100% to 300%. We can then write down the following equation, which is, then we have 2 divided by 3 plus 1 is equals 50, which is of course lesser amount. 100%, we see that the rate of profit has, due to the rise in organic composition of capital, fallen from 100 to 50%. But nonetheless, Marx was aware that this is basically not enough to prove the law of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. So we mentioned that the production of relative surplus value is achieved by decreasing the value of the means of subsistence, so which translates into sinking value of labor power, which is basically equal to variable capital. But this means that the factors that necessitate a rise in the organic composition of capital also necessitate a rise in the rate of surplus value. So since the rate of surplus value is depicted as divided by V, it is evident that the fall in the value of labor power will result in the rise of the rate of surplus value. So if we take this effect into account, the proof of the fall in the rate of profit becomes much more difficult, because we can now basically easily imagine how the adoption of labor-saving technologies result either in a fall or in a rise of the rate of profit. So now we can once again show a numerical example. So if now the first rate of profit consists of basically the rate of surplus value, which is 2, and we have 100% organic composition of capital. This means that okay, the rate of profit will be 100%. And if we now imagine a second case where we have the situation of a rising rate of surplus value, so it's presupposed that the rate of surplus value rises from 200 to 300%. So now we have 3 in the numerator. No, we will. Okay, we will presuppose that it has risen for a bit higher rate, so that it increases for 5 from 200 to 500. So, but. And no, we won't. Sorry. Okay, yeah, okay. We will presuppose that it raises from 200 to 300%, and also presuppose that the organic composition of capital rises from 100 to 300%. So in this case, we have 3 plus 1 in the denominator. So in this case, the rate of profit will be 75%. So we can see that, okay, in this case, the rate of surplus value has risen and the organic composition of capital has also risen and the rate of profit fell. But if we presuppose that, so in the third case, this rate of surplus value increases for much more, so from 200 to 500%, and that organic composition of capital also increases for the same amount as in the second case, then the rate of profit can be repeated as 5 divided by 4, which is basically, yes, 125%. So we can see that the profit rate might nevertheless as well rise. So thus and thus it becomes clear that the law of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall cannot be simply deduced from the fact of the rising organic composition of capital. So for the proof basically to be logically valid, another condition has to be fulfilled. We have to prove that the rise of the organic composition of capital will on the long term basically outgrow the rise in the rate of surplus value. So namely we have to show that organic composition of capital will we have to show that this organic composition of capital will tend to rise faster or to a higher degree than the rate of surplus value. So Marx basically provided one argument. Can I get another?
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. No, I thought. So Marx argued that as opposed to the rise in the organic composition of capital, the level of the increase in the rate of surplus value is limited, since the rise in the mass of surplus value has definite limits that cannot be surpassed. So this argument can again be depicted in a numerical example. So I don't know. Or I can so if you presuppose that I don't know, one productive unit employs 100 workers and that each of them performs 5 hours of surplus labor a day, this means that the whole sum of surplus hours performed will be the number of workers times 5, because each of these 5 workers produce 5 surplus hours of labor daily. So this means that they have altogether performed 500 hours of surplus labor. So if we now assume that labor-saving technology is adopted and that amount of living labor employed reduces substantially as a result, say from 100 to 10, now it becomes evident that no matter what, 10 workers are not able to produce as much surplus value or surplus labor as the aforementioned 100 workers. So even if we presuppose that all 10 workers are performing 24 hours of surplus labor a day, this means that they can only produce, if we only have 10 workers and that each of them performs, and this is a radical presupposition, 24 hours of surplus labor a day, they will only, they can only basically altogether perform 240 hours of surplus labor. So it becomes clear that the rise in the mass of surplus value has some limit. So if this is so, then the rise in the rate of surplus value also has definite limits, because sooner or later the displacement of workers will lead to a fall of this numerator in the equation of the rate of surplus value, and consequently then the rise in the organic composition of capital on the long term cannot be, according to Marx, compensated by sufficient rise in the rate of surplus value, or a rise of the rate of surplus value to a higher degree. So thus, according to Marx, on the long term the rate of profit will, under otherwise constant conditions, necessarily fall. So now I've outlined Marx's exposition of the law, and now I will present a critique of this exposition that was introduced by Michael Heinrich. So it seems that Marx, when writing this manuscript that later became the 3rd volume of Capital, thought that his proof that the rise in the mass of surplus value has a definite limit was also sufficient to prove that the rate of profit basically must fall. So Marx was indeed right to point out that when the number of workers falls beyond a certain limit, the amount of surplus value produced also decreases no matter how much the rate of surplus value has increased. So we have verified it with this numerical example. But Heinrich argues that this is not enough to prove the law of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall, and his argument is basically as follows. So that a declining mass of surplus value indicates a certain fall of the rate of profit only when we presuppose that the mass of total capital that is needed for the production of this surplus value does not decline, but at least remains constant. So this can again be demonstrated with a simple, or not so simple for me, numerical example, because I'm not so good at math, as you have seen. So in the first case, we have the equation of the rate of profit, which is, we can presuppose that the mass of surplus value is 50 units, and that we have 50 units of constant capital as well as 50 units of variable capital. In this case, the rate of profit will be 50%. So now we can imagine that the rate of profit will produce this effect of falling amount of surplus value. So surplus value will reduce from 50 to 40 for 10 units, and we can presuppose that due to adoption of labor-saving technologies, this share of constant capital will also increase, while the share of basically variable capital will decrease to some extent. So in this case, we come to a rate of profit that is 40%. So of course, we can see that this adoption of new labor-saving technologies that caused the rise in the organic composition of capital, as well as the rise in the rate of surplus value, results in the fall in the rate of profit. However, we can also imagine another case where the mass in the surplus value also decreases from 50 to 40, but that this basically boost in productivity, this adoption of labor-saving technology results in basically the fact that a lot of workers go out of business, and because the capitalist only needs a very lower amount of variable capital. So we can presuppose that the number of workers, or no, I mean it's not equal to the number of workers, but the value of variable capital reduces from 50 to 10. But so in that case, we will have a rate of profit of approximately 57%. So we can now see that in the third case, the rate of profit has increased despite the fact that the mass of surplus value has fallen, and despite the fact that organic composition of capital actually increased enormously, because in this case, if you look at the organic composition of capital for the first example, it is basically 50 divided by 50, which is 100%. But in the second case, organic composition of capital equals 60 divided by 10, which means, we have to add the percentages, means that it's 60%, so 600, sorry. So the rate of profit basically has increased in this third case because the mass of total capital advanced has decreased. So this is the mass of the total capital advanced. So the rate of profit has fallen only in the second case, in which the value of the total capital advanced remained constant. So this is in this case, because 60 plus 40 equals 50 plus 50. So this basically indicates that the necessity of the fall of the mass of surplus value does not automatically necessitate the fall in the rate of profit. So if we now return to are example of reduction of the number of workers, we can clearly see why it is insufficient to indicate a certain fall in the rate of profit, because should the number of workers be reduced from 100 to 10, as in this example above, this would mean that the value of variable capital would reduce for 1/10 of its previous value. So, okay, I'm finishing. So if we keep the general formula of the rate of profit in mind, so this is the general formula, we can see that this would result, this decrease in the number of workers, in a substantial fall of the V in the denominator, which would certainly cause a tendency for the rate of profit to rise. Moreover, the displacement of workers by the introduction of labor-saving technology also implies the reduction of the value of the means of subsistence, which basically correspond to the value of labor power. So along these lines, effect would be an even further reduction in the value of variable capital. So this means that the variable capital that employs 10 workers will shrink to even less than 1/10 of the variable capital that employs basically 100 workers. So in these conditions, the proof that the rate of profit will fall is only possible if we can also prove that the constant capital will increase for at least the same amount by which the variable capital has been reduced. So only if we prove that this kind of situation must necessarily be the case. But because only then can we exclude the possibility of a falling mass of the whole capital advanced and consequentially prove that the fall in the rate of profit is certain. However, on such a general level, this simply cannot be proven, since we cannot possibly know if the increase in productivity was basically implemented with a substantial or just minor increase in the value of constant capital. So Heinrich outlines this dubiousness as follows. So if constant capital does not increase strongly enough to compensate the reduction of variable capital, then the total capital advanced declines. In this case, we have a declining mass of surplus value and declining capital. Whether the rate of profit falls depends upon what falls quicker, the mass of surplus value or the advanced capital. If the mass of surplus value falls quicker than the advanced capital, then the rate of profit declines. If the advanced capital declines quicker than surplus value, then the rate of profit increases despite the reduction in the mass of surplus value. So the conclusion would be that departing from these dynamics of capitalist development, we cannot simply assume in advance that there is a law of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. The rate of profit, of course, might fall. We cannot exclude this option, but it might very well rise due to this same dynamics. So I have to stop here.